What's up, everyone? It's Cannan back with another RWBY video. Sorry, no Jess this time. There's some personal family stuff going on for Jess right now. I'm not going to go into detail for it. If she wants to, I'm sure she'll either say something on her Twitter or the community page or tab for the channel. So just keep an eye out for that if she decides to speak on that. But in this video, as you can tell by the title, I am going to go over my top 5. Decided not to go with 6 this time because, time and all that, because it's getting kind of late. I need to go to bed for work tomorrow. So yeah, this is going to be my top 5 favorite fights from RWBY. If Jess wants to, eventually we will do her favorite fights, and then Monday I'm thinking will be my favorite characters, and then eventually we can do Jess's favorite characters if she wants to. So yeah, so fighting in RWBY is one of its main draw points. That's what a lot of people watch RWBY for. And even as far back as Volume 1, that's one thing that I can say about Volume 1 is that it had pretty good fights. And then, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, Volume 5, etc., they got better, way better, especially as the production of the animation went up, and they even started using, motion cap, I believe, and all that to make it a little bit more fresh and a little bit more fluid in a lot of ways. And of course, when they moved engines from 3 to 4, it produced even better fights. So we're going to start off with my 5th favorite fight, and it's from Volume 1, and that, of course, is Team RWBY versus the Nevermoor. This is one of the few high points of Volume 1 for me, because as you all know, I'm not a huge fan, neither is Jess, of Volume 1. Not to say it is terrible, but I do think it's the low point of the series in a way that it was the first volume, low budget, and it shows. And to a lot of people, it's their least favorite volume just because things just get so much better. Animation, storytelling, just, character designs, like just things got better. But Volume 1 is where it all started, so it does have its merits, and it is this fight. This was like, besides the fight between RWBY and Torchwick's henchmen in episode 1, this is one of the more big fights of Volume 1. It was the fight that really gave off that, hey, this show is going to have some very big fights in it. And, it's from classic things like, Yang firing shots into the Nevermoor's mouth, all 4 of them like teaming up to take out the Nevermoor, with RWBY using her scythe to drag it up a cliff, using the glyphs from Weiss to decapitate it pretty much. I always thought to this day that the image of RWBY standing on top of the cliff with the rose petals swirling around and all that was one of the best images from the early volumes. And so yeah, that's my 5th favorite fight in the entire series. Whenever we watch through Volume 1, I always look forward to this part just because I love the fight that much. Next fight is from Volume 2, and that is Yang versus Neo. So as Yang is my favorite character, it is, when I first saw this episode back in the day, it was kind of a bitter pill to swallow. This was Yang's first loss, really, her first real big defeat, to a girl that was half her size. But I also really like Neo. Neo is also one of my favorite characters. So it was fun. This was great seeing Neo's fighting style. She's got a very unique fighting style, and just seeing her easily dodge Yang's attacks. Like, Yang was pretty much fighting air for most of this fight. And it's the fact that Neo bested her. Neo is still one of the characters that has bested Yang, that Yang has not really had a rematch with. Could we eventually get Yang versus Neo Part 2? I don't know. Me and Jess both seem to think that Neo is going to take on more of a anti-hero role eventually. Um, Jess likens her to Harley Quinn, and that she's going to agree to fight alongside T. Ruby, the whole the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. But I also thought this fight was really good for Yang because usually for in certain stories the hero has to suffer their first defeat so they can learn from it. Um because if you look back through other things like two instances come to my mind. It's like when Goku lost to Master Roshi in the first tournament in Dragon Ball. That was one of Goku's very first big defeats, and it just led to him wanting to become a better fighter and get stronger. And even in Final Fantasy XIV, like the Warrior of Light's first really big defeat is Xenos. And through that, the Warrior of Light goes on another adventure. And through that adventure, they hone their skills. And by the time they face Xenos again, they have acquired enough strength to fail him. And though that's not exactly the story that they're telling as far as with Yang and Neo goes, it was probably a precursor to what Yang would go through after losing her arm to Adam and the training that her father put her through. That this might have been like a little precursor that would eventually go to that. So yeah, it's a fun fight. Yang's first really big loss. And to show really how good of a fighter Neo is. So yeah, that's my fourth pick. My third pick, and this was hard because for the longest time this was my most favorite fight in RWBY, and one of the highlights, if you ask me, for Volume 5, and that is Raven versus Cinder. This was a big fight. This was like Dragon Ball Z level fight. This was like Avengers level fight. You had two maidens going head to head, and the power they showed off, like it was literally like the area around the vault was going to collapse. And what I enjoyed about this is that we had already had seen Cinder fight, but we had never really got to see her go all out until this fight. And then, of course, Raven spent most of Volume 9 as this mysterious, fighter who, we really, besides her, like, intimidating Neo to save Yang in Volume 2, which draws back to the Yang versus Neo fight, we had not really seen just how strong Raven is. And then the revelation that she's a maiden made her even stronger. And yeah, like to me, as far as scale and just like, energies flying all over the place and all that, like even Cinder versus Penny wasn't as big as this, because not to down Penny as a maiden, because I love Penny, and but it's almost like Penny never really had time to really get used to having the maiden's power. So it's kind of like Cinder kind of toyed with her for most of their fight in Volume 8. Whereas once Winter got the Winter Maiden powers, Winter is a way more experienced fighter. She kind of adapted to it a bit faster. And so she was a bit more of a match against Cinder, where Raven all out bested Cinder. And I've always kind of thought that Cinder is pretty strong when it comes up against people who she is definitely stronger against, but when it comes to going up against people who have more experience than her, she seems to have more L's than she does W's. So yeah, that's my third favorite fight, Cinder versus Raven. I still think it's one of the high points of Volume 5. I know a lot of people think that Volume 5 was kind of a mess, but I do think this is one aspect of the volume that rocked. Like, people complain about the fight in Haven between Team RWBY and Team Juniper versus Mercury and Emerald and Hazel, and they spent all the budget on this fight, it seems like. But yeah, I love this fight. I still don't think we've had really a fight that matches it as far as scale, like I said. I think once we get closer to Endgame, we will have more fights like this. But yeah, Raven versus Cinder, you know, seeing Cinder all out lose was a pretty defining fight, I will say. So yeah, that's why it is my third favorite. My second favorite is from Volume 7, and that is Team RWBY versus the Aesops. Now, when this fight happened and me and Jess went over our analysis and in our reaction, I did seem to favor the Blake and Yang versus Elm and Vine fight just because. Okay, so Blake and Yang, in a lot of ways, are the perfect team in the show, and this fight showcases it. They were like a well-oiled machine. They click, you know, and that's what I enjoy about the fight. It showed what two partners can really accomplish who trust and know each other. Um, and that's not to down Ruby and Weiss either. It's just that it seemed like in this fight, Weiss more or less fought Marrow, while Ruby more or less fought Harriet. But it kind of fits because Ruby had kind of already, all Volume had kind of been establishing kind of a rivalry with Harriet. But Weiss did help her in the end take down Harriet. But it was also kind of a show of progression for Team RWBY. You know, at the beginning of Volume 7, they were way behind the Aesops, but by the end of Volume 7, after spending, you know, a few months training and getting stronger, they had, you know, at that time we thought bested the Aesops, but then we learned in Volume 8 that one of the biggest reasons why they lost against Team RWBY is that they don't really fight as a team. And I wonder if that's ever, well, it probably won't now that two members of the Aesops are now gone, with Harriet, Elm, and Marrow being the only three left. But it's gonna, I'm wondering, with Marrow's already had his character change. I'm wondering what they're going to do with Elm, and we finally got to see Harriet drop her act and show more emotion toward the end of Volume 8. I'm sure she's probably going to blame herself in a lot of ways because it was kind of her actions that led to Vine's death in some way. So we'll have to see. But yes, this to me was the best, one of the better fights of Volume 7, because it built the whole volume. We just knew at some point Team RWBY would fight the Aesops, and I don't think it disappointed. I don't think it disappointed at all, and that is why it is my second favorite fight. Now, my first favorite fight, I'm sure a lot of people are not going to be shocked about. I don't have any honorable mentions in this one just because I want this to be as short as I can make it. One I will bring up is it's a lot of people are going to think I'm defending Volume 5. It's not a huge fight, but as she is my favorite character, I thought it was a good defining moment for her, and that is Yang versus the Bandits in Volume 5. I just think that's a great Yang fight, a great way to show that she had came back from her injury, still dealing with it, still dealing with her PTSD, but it shows that her strength is still there. So, as a Yang fan, that will always be one of my all-time favorite fights. Even though it's a small little fight, it's still big as far as Yang goes. But yeah, my all-time favorite fight is Blake and Yang versus Adam from Volume 6. Now, no, it is not just because of Bumblebee. This fight, I think, had a lot of elements that make a good fight. It had the tension, especially when Blake was fighting Adam all on her own. It had the build up because, you know, it would cut to showing Yang on her way on her motorcycle, so you know she's on her way, but will she get there in time? The music that plays during the whole entire fight, the dialogue, all the different stories and emotions that's going on throughout the fight, the choreography. I think this is one of the best. It's technically a 2-on-1 fight, but a lot of it is either Blake fighting Adam or Yang fighting Adam. It really isn't until some small parts of it that it eventually becomes a 2-on-1 fight. But just great cuts, great choreography. They did an amazing job plotting out this fight. Yang using her semblance when she actually needed to, using what her father taught her, even going back to, I may not be faster, but I'm smarter than I was, which is once again called back to Ty's training because he taught her to fight smarter. And, it's an emotional fight. But like I said, every time I go back and watch this, the one thing that stands out to me is the music. A lot of these scenes from RWBY or anything, video games, movies, anything that involves stuff like this, if it has no music, it loses everything. Music is really, if you think about it, a driving force in media. It really is, whether it be in a video game. If you watch some of your favorite scenes from a video game or from an anime or something and it has no music, it falls kind of flat. It really does. How many areas in Elden Ring would just not seem special without the music playing in the background? How many boss fights would seem even more of a chore if you didn't have the great orchestral choir singing music in the background? And it's the same with this. Just the whole entire fight loses its zest a little bit if all you had was grunts and yells and dialogue. Which is why, for me, Volume 6 is still one of the perfect volumes, and it's just because the soundtrack, Volume 6's soundtrack to this day is just like the volume, my favorite one. Every song in that volume was great. Standouts are like the opener, Rising. I still to this day do not think RWBY has had a better opener than Rising. I think Rising is the perfect song for a show like this that has a lot of action in it. Indomitable, almost makes me cry every time I hear it. And the orchestral music, or instrumental music, if you want to call it, drove this volume and it drove this fight. And I believe the track that plays mostly during this is called We're Protecting Each Other. And it's a great piece of music. If you're one of the people who don't really listen to the instrumental music when the soundtracks come out, go back and listen to that. It is an amazing piece of music, and you can really picture this fight frame by frame in your head as you listen to it. So yeah, I mean, a little bit of the Bumblebee building is there as well, but it was just a great fight. This was a fight that a lot of us were thinking about since the end of Volume 3, and it finally happened. And truth be told, you can ask Jess, I did not think we would get this fight at the end of Volume 6. I really thought they would prolong it a little bit longer. But yeah, so that is my favorite fights from RWBY. And it's really hard sometimes to pick just 5 fights out of a show that is almost about to go for 9 seasons, and there's been a lot. Some shorter than others, some not as big as others, but this was really not a hard list to pick from. There are a few others that I could have mentioned, like Team RWBY versus Tortrick in the robot, whatever it was called, and because that one was pretty cool. That's where we got a little bit more focus on Yang's semblance, and we learned about it a little bit more, and other things like that. So these have always been my favorite fights. Like, I'll tell you every time. RWBY versus the Nevermoor, Team RWBY versus the Nevermoor, Neo versus Yang, Raven versus Cinder, Team RWBY versus the Aesops, and Blake and Yang versus Adam. I don't know if we'll get many fights in Volume 9 because, from what we've heard about it, but who knows. Can't wait to see the Nevermoor fight recreated in Ice Queendom. I think that is going to be amazing. And yeah, so as always, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, click that like button, leave us a comment. Please keep Jess in your thoughts. And as always, guys, this is Cannan. Me and Jess love you all very, very much. Stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.